Exodus 20, verses 1 through 12. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down before them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work, you, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that is in them, but rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you.
Our New Testament lesson comes from the Gospel according to Mark, the 7th chapter, verses 9 through 13. Mark 7, 9 through 13. Listen for the word of God. Then Jesus said to them, "You have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to keep your tradition. For Moses said, 'Honor your father and your mother,' and whoever speaks evil of father or mother must surely die. But you say that if anyone tells father or mother, 'Whatever support you might have had from me is korban,' that is, an offering to God, then you no longer permit doing anything for a father or mother, thus making void the word of God through your tradition that you have handed on. And you do many things like this." Here in the readings. My father died in 2002 at the age of 82. Like most sons and daughters, I knew relatively little about his former life, who he was before he married my mother and I came along. I did know that though our orientation was primarily to my mother's family, my father carried a special devotion to his mother. I had seen the World War I Silver Star awarded to his father for pulling 6 wounded men to safety while under a heavy bombardment. I knew that one of those men that he saved became a minister and preached my grandfather's funeral when he died during World War II. I also knew my grandfather returned home from the war categorized as shell shock, and that physical debilitation eventually caused disabilities that took his life. Because of the absence of the social net we possess today, my grandfather's inability to work to function through the family into abject poverty. One of the few stories my father shared with me about his childhood was that every Christmas he stood in a long line in front of the Maysville, Kentucky Salvation Army to get an orange and a little wooden toy. I also knew that he carried a feeling of inadequacy about his lack of education. He never told me how far he got in school, but in a moment of unusual wistful candor, he once admitted to me, "I believed if I had an education, I could have done anything." It explained the unspoken assumption in our house that though we were the children of parents who did not seek higher education, my sister and I would attend college. What I did not learn until my father was gone was that he quit school in the 8th grade because my grandfather's health deteriorated to the point that my father had to go to work full time to support his mother and 7 brothers and sisters. I also learned from my mother that from that day he quit school until the day they got married, my dad brought his weekly paycheck home to his mother. She would give my dad a little spending money and employ the rest to raise the family. Even when my dad was in the Marine Corps during World War II, his paycheck went home to to his mother. Now, I never heard my father repeat the fifth commandment. You shall honor your father and your mother. He surely never said it to me, yet I have a firm grasp on what it means because from watching him, how he loved, cared for, and treated my grandmother. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Scholars see this as a bridge between the commandments honoring God and those oriented toward neighbors. One common mistake views this commandment as being addressed only to young children. The commandment is specifically directed to adult children. It establishes our responsibility to aging parents. In some ancient societies, the elderly could be discarded when food was scarce or they became a physical burden. No longer able to work, their age and fragility could categorize them as making no contribution to society. This commandment speaks pointedly to the responsibility of children to care for those who can no longer care for themselves. Now, the word honor is not synonymous with obedience. It instructs us to treat our parents as persons of great weight with high regard. The Hebrew word for honor means to make heavy. Parents are to be highly prized, shown respect. The word also carries traces of caring for and showing affection. We understand the implications of the word more fully when we note that the Bible also uses it to describe our proper response to God. Now, how do we honor our parents? By providing for their physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. This is the core meaning of the commandment. We not only love them, but we show them that love. We honor them by performing those acts that bring pleasure and pride to them. We live exemplifying those values they taught. Of all living creatures, humans take the longest time to be able to support and care for themselves. Parents are partners with God in the act of creation. Breaking this commandment is to be guilty of ingratitude. By honoring our parents, we give dignity and value to their lives. How we treat our elderly speaks to who we are as individuals and as a nation. Even though Robert Louis Stevenson died in 1894, his books, such as Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, still delight us today. Biblical scholar William Barclay told the story of one day one of Stevenson's friends was looking through a scrapbook of press clippings containing many of the awards and praise given to him in his books. "Well, Lewis," said the friend, "is fame all that it's cracked up to be?" And Lewis looked up and replied, "Yes, when I see my mother's face." When our parents witness faith and love being central aspects of our lives, it will bring joy to theirs. Honor your father and your mother. This commandment not only speaks to our present, but calls us to remember and respect our past. It reminds us that life is a gift. Not a single one of us brought ourselves into being. We did not get here on our own. None of us is self-made. The first act of love and grace we experience is when a parent changes our diaper. The fifth commandment calls us to recall the blessings bestowed upon us. We see the sacrifices others made for us. We honor those who formed us into what we are. And we grasp the responsibility to duplicate the love we have received. When we do this, when we respect our past, recognize what others, particularly our parents, did to bring us to this point in our lives, we become aware of our responsibility to the future. We have fostered a society replete with racial violence, a deteriorating environment, a growing gap between rich and poor, and accumulating national debt. What we leave undone will be passed on to those who come after us. In calling us to honor our parents, to love and care for their physical, mental, and spiritual needs, the commandment reminds us of our debt and responsibility not only to those who have gone before us, but those who will come after us. There's a Native American saying that reads, "No decision should be made without considering its effect up to the 7th generation." Brian Blunt, president of Union Seminary, in a sermon several weeks ago said one of his trustees narrated an encounter with a group of little children with whom she was working. One of the children produced a bag of crackers and proceeded munching. After realizing that he entertained no plan to share with the other children, she requested an explanation, and at first he ignored her. Then, sensing a teachable moment, she engaged him biblically. "Remember Jesus and the little boy who shared his loaves and fish?" she inquired. "Lots of people were able to eat. Jesus came to teach us to share and be kind to others." The little boy's response was decisive. "No, he didn't. He came for our salvation." Well, it can be easy and tempting to focus on one element of biblical teaching while ignoring the others. This commandment does mandate that we care for our parents, but it also calls us to make the world a better place for those who will come after us. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This is the only commandment that indicates its fulfillment will produce a well-lived life in the land God is about to give to the Israelites. When it states "so that your days may be long," the commandment reminds us that actions have consequences. A life constructed around thinking and caring for others, selflessness, generosity with time and money, and a loving spirit will produce peace and harmony. A life well lived. The Bible strongly advocates that acting in obedience to God's commandments elicits a long and happy existence, not conflict-free, but grounded in the principles and values that produce contentment and fulfillment. Bad things do sometimes happen to good people, but taken as a whole, striding along the path of God's commandments produces long days in the land. And we witness this on two levels. The Old Testament prophets continuously warn Israel that if they desire to be a strong and stable nation, they must care for the weakest of their society. Orphans, children, widows, the poor, and the elderly. Likewise, parenting is a holy endeavor not just performed for the sake of our children, but our community and the world. Whether it is our country, our city, our church, our family, prosperity and stability will not happen by caring for the strongest, but the weakest. And this is particularly true for adult children. This commandment teaches a very simple truth. Wake up, this is the most important thing. Your children will learn how to love, care, and honor you by watching how you love, care, and honor your parents. In her book, Smoke on the Mountain, Joy Davidson relates this fairy tale from the Brothers Grimm. Once upon a time, there was a little old man. His eyes blinked and his hands trembled. When he ate, he clattered the silverware distressingly, missed his mouth with a spoon as often as not, and dribbled a bit of his food on the tablecloth. Now, he lived with his married son, having nowhere else to live, and his son's wife was a modern young woman who knew that in-laws should not be tolerated in a woman's home. "I can't have this," she said. "It interferes with a woman's right to happiness." So she and her husband took the little old man gently but firmly by the arm and led him to the corner of the kitchen. There they set him on a stool and gave him his food, what there was of it, in an earthenware bowl. From then on, he always ate in the corner, blinking at the table with wistful eyes. One day, his hands trembled rather more than usual, and the earthenware bowl fell and broke. "If you are a pig," said the daughter-in-law, "you must eat out of a trough." So they made him a little wooden trough, and he got his meals in that. Well, these people had a 4-year-old son of whom they were very fond, and one supper time the young man noticed his boy playing intently with some bits of wood and asked what he was doing. "I'm making a trough," he said, smiling up for approval, "to feed you and Mama out of when I get big." The man and his wife looked at each other for a while and didn't say anything. Then they cried a little. Then they went to the corner and took the little old man by the arm and led him back to the table. They sat him in a comfortable chair and gave him his food on his plate. And from then on, nobody ever scolded when he clattered or spilled or broke things. We will teach and instruct our children how to care for us by how we honor our fathers and our mothers. Because I said so. Likely most of us have interpreted this commandment as demanding that children obey their parents, especially when parents, as most of us have, answered a child's challenge with, "Because I said so." This is often because the Apostle Paul employed this commandment as proof to his words in Ephesians 6 when he said, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." The phrase "in the Lord" is a qualifier in this admonition. This commandment does not require children give obedience to abusive parents or remain in destructive environments. Rather, addressed to adult children, this commandment declares our responsibility to meet the needs of our aging parents. Notice it doesn't say that we honor our parents if they deserve it. There are no exceptions here. Also note that even in this patriarchal society, father and mother are given equal honor. This morning, whatever age we may be, let us ask ourselves how we have or are honoring our parents. If you and I are looking to achieve a long and prosperous life, God says, honoring your father and your mother is the first step.